Big good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for being here today. Thank you for joining us for one more study by biblical study from this Your Positive Action Ministry. Today, we're going to be looking at Isaiah chapter 39, or just a small glimpse at Isaiah 39. We are going to answer some questions together, and then we are going to have some small takeaways at the end. Before I go into Isaiah 39, we're going to look at a little bit of a recap from Isaiah chapter 38. For those of you that have been following the series over here about the book of Isaiah, in chapter 38, we learned that King Hezekiah faced death. He faced death from an illness. This is after he had overcome the almost overtaken from the Assyrian Empire over Israel at that time. He was ill, and he was told by Isaiah to get his house in order in preparation for his death. What he did in the face of doing this, he actually turned to prayer and praising God, asking him for additional time on earth. Uh, in chapter 38, we learned that God takes pity on him and hear his pleas and actually grants him additional time on earth, shows mercy to him and allows him to live longer. He actually turns away again into prayer. King Hezekiah, we learned that prays again in acknowledgement of the power of God and in thanks and reverence of God. The main takeaway that we have from the book, from the chapter 38 from Isaiah was that we gotta pray. Pray and pray. Pray always. Pray for what we want, pray for what we don't have, and pray for all the things and glories that God shows us. Okay. In chapter 39, we learn that there's a convoy from Babylon that comes to see King Hezekiah. The king of Babylon hears of the illness and recovery of Hezekiah. This is after Hezekiah, also word of Hezekiah's, I don't want to say, their defeat over the Babylons, but the word of them overcoming the threat of Babylon, or not of Babylon, I'm sorry, of the Assyrian Empire taking them. After word got out of this, we understand that Babylon learns of all of this and learns of the illness of Hezekiah and learns of the recovery. So now they're intrigued. So there's like a spotlight that actually shine upon them. Remember that this is after the death already. By this point in history, just for historical context, uh, Sennacherib, which was the ruler of Assyria by this point, historically speaking, has already died. Okay, he died by the sword, as we learn in chapter 37, by being beheaded by one of his sons. So the king of Babylon hears of all of this, and Babylon at this point no longer looks at the Assyrian Empire as a threat, but they actually look on their eyes, historically speaking, as to the lands that they want to conquer. So we learning here that there's a convoy that actually goes to Hezekiah to visit him because they have learned of all of this. So in these times, Hezekiah sees this as a form of honoring to him. It is what we can infer from the small text that we learn in it. Okay, so this is going to be posting my first question up to the audience. For those of you guys that have read it, anybody can answer in here. Um, I want to ask you, what was sent to the king and why? Anybody, please.
I
Go ahead, Theodore.
yeah, the king saying the Babylonian king saying give a letter to Hezekiah, and the main objective that he wanted is that Hezekiah back the Babylonian against the Assyrian. That was the whole objective.
Okay, that was our main objective, and I'm glad that you mentioned. So there's two things: gifts and letters. Diana also had mentioned that. This is part of the reason why Hezekiah's guard actually is lowered, because he sees these gifts and he actually lowers his guard in thinking of Babylon's intention. So because of the Assyrian, like Theo Ralph mentioned, because of the Assyrian conflict and the opportunity that this presents for Babylon itself. Hezekiah, in turn, because of all of these things, shows everything in the palace. He actually says in the text that there was not one thing that he didn't show them. When Hezekiah speaks to Isaiah, he tells them that they saw everything from the riches of the palace to all the pretty much strategical, let's say, advantages of the palace. So when he did this, there's a reason why. So like, I want to ask, this is my second question. Why did the king, do you think the king do this? Why do you think the king did this? Well, Theo Ralph again, go ahead.
Because the king, in back of his mind, he was planning to conquer, this kingdom in the future. He wanted to know what they have over there. So that's why
I think he means King Hezekiah, not King of Babylon, right?
No, no.
I'm glad that Theo Ralph actually went that way, because a lot of people actually do think that Babylon actually did this, let's say at the time, for this purpose. But to Jesse's point, I'm talking about Hezekiah right now. Why do you think he showed them? Go ahead, Titi.
I think he was just being boastful. Look at me, I have so many things, trying to show off.
Okay, and that's great. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that was my initial gut reaction. So when I read more into the text, it seems that at that point, Hezekiah is already older in life, and he's also has overcome the illness and everything like that. So when you read about the Jewish scholars that have been able to write about this, Hezekiah was also worried about what was going to happen with the kingdom after he left. So he was looking at Babylon as a potential ally.
Yeah.
Okay, as a potential ally that could protect them in the future. All right. But as Theo Ralph mentioned and alluded to, the king of Babylon actually didn't do this because he didn't see Hezekiah as an ally or as somebody that they were going to keep close. It was just as more of a prey of opportunity. That's why he was looking. Isaiah has a prophecy for the king in the light of all of this, and he told them very directly what was going to happen. He actually let him know that everything was going to be lost, that actually his future offsprings were going to be captured and they were going to be in servitude, that all of the everything that he had worked for, everything that the kingdom had gone through was going to be meaningless, was going to be taken away. I want to know, what was his attitude, because this is very important. What was Hezekiah's, more specifically, Hezekiah's attitude in light of Isaiah's prophecy when he reveals this to him? Anybody else?
I'm sorry, I listened to the wrong chapter.
Oh, okay, that's okay. Go ahead, Theo Rob, then.
Hezekiah told Isaiah, "Oh, in my kingdom, it's gonna be peace while I'm king."
Yeah, this
No, basically, so not to worry about it, that. He was sure of that, because Isaiah was worried about, what's gonna happen. Oh, you show these people all the treasury, they're gonna come after them. That was Isaiah was worried about that. They're gonna be conquered, in the future. Whereas the guy said, "Oh no, while I'm here, it's gonna be peace."
Yeah. So, as I mentioned before, Hezekiah, according to the Jewish scholars, went through a period of thinking of what's going to happen after he's gone with the kingdom. Nonetheless, when Isaiah later on comes to him and tells him, "Oh, you're worried about what's going to happen," because this is more. There's a lot more text that in the translation and the transliterations of the Bible throughout the years. This portion of it, this chapter is very small in comparison to other chapters of Isaiah, and it is believed that in the translations and the transliterations of the Bible, at different points of time in history, they have been taking out certain things that they didn't consider, let's say, necessary to transmit the point. However, when we learn of all the things, some of the things that were taken out, we know that there's a period of time that goes by. Actually, in one of the scholars that I actually was able to see a video of, a YouTube video, he speaks that there was a period of time of about 2 years approximately that goes by between Hezekiah doing some of these actions, and Isaiah is being able to actually give him the futures that is going to happen, revealing the prophecy that was given to him by God. When Isaiah is actually able to come to the king and actually see him, it's a span of time that happened to him. So the priorities of Hezekiah change a little bit. And the attitude that he adopts is not necessarily one of being boastful or being, let's say, dismissive of Isaiah, but it's one of more, let me take care of things while I'm here. So his response there in Entron, because of that, because of while I'm here, there will be peace. The kingdom will be fine. We will be prosperous while I'm here, because his priorities have shifted over that span of time. All right. So when we actually look at this chapter, there's a specific meaning that actually we see in here. Diana, do you have the chapter up by any chance? She's gonna look it up for me so that way we can actually hear the last verse of the chapter, and we can actually sort of analyze a little bit of what does this tell us. What does this say to us real quick, Diana? Go ahead.
The word of the Lord you have spoken is good, Hezekiah replied. Is that the word?
Yes. So notice, go ahead.
For he thought there will be peace and security in my lifetime.
Okay. Notice that what I just told you right there lets you know the specifics of what Hezekiah's attitude was. So from the beginning of the chapter to the end of the chapter, there's a very different mindset that he goes through. And this is the biggest evidence that we have that this happened over a span of time, that it wasn't immediate. It wasn't like 1 day or 2 days or anything like that. That is some of the evidence that historians have been able to use to say, like, okay, there's a little bit that has been missing in translation in here, because the attitude is so different. Whether you want to say that at the beginning of it, Hezekiah had a prideful heart or something like that, and was boastful about, let's say, where the kingdom was at that time, to where it is at the end. Notice that at the end of the chapter, he says that what Isaiah has said is fine with him, and lets him know as to where the kingdom is and will remain while he's here on earth. So the reason that I mentioned that is because Hezekiah becomes then worry only about the things that are happening in his lifetime toward the end. And this is something that happens oftentimes when we are faced with situations that are, let's say, life or death. Remember that this is after Hezekiah has overcome death to an extent, overcome death from an illness that he was said to die, from Isaiah telling him, get your house in order, because very soon you're no more, and then him being given extra life, extra time on earth by God. So there's a progression in here of where Hezekiah is. And I only mention that because it's important that we keep that in mind, so that way we can actually make it relevant to our life. And with that being said, let me go on to some of the takeaways that I think were interesting for this chapter. And then if you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can actually tell me. I gotta tell you, the biggest takeaway in here is be careful to who you open your doors. Okay, and the reason why is because it's very obvious. In here, Hezekiah, we see have whether it's the good or not so good intentions at the beginning of the chapter, but he could be boastful. So just be careful of who you open the doors. Notice that you have to put always God first onto it, whoever you invite in your home. Be careful about that. Try to always to keep the Lord's teachings in mind whenever you actually are interacting with people. The company you keep will lead you to successful downfall, not only in your daily life, but also spiritually. Remember, there's many books that talk about you being the sum of the people that are closest to you. The 5 people that actually surround you are, and the sum of those people are mainly what you are. So they have a lot of say into the person that you are and what's going to happen with you. Seek the guidance from those who are wiser than you. Hezekiah in here turns away to an extent, or turns the deaf ear to the words of Isaiah, even though at the end he actually tells him that what God says is good. You understand that the part of the kingdom will be no more. Your children will be captured, will be enslaved. He actually turned the deaf ear to it. You know, in there we see Hezekiah turning away from the wise words of Isaiah. Don't let your pride guide your actions to the point that your Raphael mentioned. All right, he was boastful out of pride or anything like that. He overshowed in his palace. I think to an extent there's a level of truth to that. Okay, whether he thought that they were allies or not, he did it with pride when he talks about in the text we learned that he thought he showed them all the treasures of the castle. Don't do that. Boasting about what you have will only lead you away from God in this life. Being boastful is something that God actually hates. We actually spoke about this in our Thursday night group. God detests a boastful heart. Remember that. Remain humble and do not forget your humble beginnings. Remember, please, wherever you come from is a determinant of where you are today, and that will lead you to where God wants you to be in the future. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please let me know.
Very good chapter,
Thank
brother.
you.
Very good.
Really good. That was great. I was